let's move on to possibly the finest geek moment of 2001 overall, and that was the December 19th release of the first film in Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy, The Fellowship of the Ring. So good.
Yeah.
It was so good.
Yeah.
I don't even know where to start. Terry, help me.
I remember being in a movie theater, must have been the year before, but like seeing the trailer that they put together for the trilogy plan and it just blowing my mind. Like I love fantasy. You might be able to tell that by the fact I perked up with Golden Sun and Final Fantasy and all those things. But that was like the real defining moment for fantasy in terms of TV and movies. Like that was the time when it proved to the world, hey, we can adapt this and make this awesome and make it work.
And it was I remember so vividly, it was so hugely anticipated, these movies, and it actually delivered.
Yeah.
And possibly and more.
Yeah.
Which is so crazy because Peter Jackson was like known best for his like B horror movies.
Yeah,
Before then,
totally.
he was sort of
And like frighteners.
he
It's
was
one of those
not.
things that had no right to turn out as good as it did.
And it did because he was such a big fan and because they filmed it all at once and in New Zealand, which we've now learned is like a perfect double
pretty
apparently
much
for
there.
all
Yeah.
fantasy worlds. And that cast was just really exceptional for a lot of relative unknowns at the time.
Yeah, I mean, unknowns at the time who went on, I mean, between Viggo Mortensen.
Elijah Wood.
Is that his name?
Yeah. Yes.
I was about to say Viggo Morgenstein, which
Well,
is the thing
that
from
sounds-
It's
I don't
Always
think you
Sunny.
appreciate that.
No, it's always sunny. Yeah, and then Sean Bean and Orlando Bloom. It also, it put Weta on the map,
Yes.
like right up there with ILM. And it
Yes.
was, I think, one of the reasons it was so effective, and one of the reasons it works over the Hobbit trilogy, is because so much of it was practical. So much of it was, costumes, actual sets.
Yeah. Those extended
actual human
editions,
beings.
the behind the scenes of the Lord of the Rings movies, are probably the favorites that I've ever seen, just because they go into so much detail on every single aspect
And
of
you
the production.
wanted to, right?
Yeah.
Like I anticipated those extended editions. I watched all of them with my entire family,
Yeah.
and I was
Yeah.
like the
It's great.
lone
I
fantasy fan.
adore the 4-hour extended edition.
Yeah.
Although, fun fact, I love the Lord of the Rings, the original Lord of the Rings trilogy so much. I actually, even though I own the extended trilogy stuff, I won't watch the behind the scenes stuff because I don't want
man.
the illusion. Like I
It's
don't want
so
the curtain
good.
pulled
It's
back.
How they made the
I just want
Hobbits
to believe
work
it.
was so interesting because it was like some of the scenes they shot with different depth, and some of
Yeah.
them they had doubles for
Yeah.
it, and just watching this is now ruining it for you. I'm pulling away the mirage all these many
Elijah
years
Wood
later.
isn't that small.
Elijah Wood's not a tiny person.
And like the scale doesn't really work in all the scenes. Like
Yeah.
it varies sometimes, but it was so flawlessly made
Yeah.
at the time. And I think really, Lord of the Rings, I think, is considered the great granddaddy of fantasy as we know it
Totally.
The
now.
Oscars didn't come until after the third film, which
Right.
finally they did, but.
And that was sort of a thanks for everything.
yeah,
It was
But I think it's you could say that the Fellowship of the Ring and this trilogy really ushered in the era of the 3-hour film. Like that. After that, it became okay to have 2-hour, 45-minute, 3-hour films in theaters, whereas before, it was like an hour and a half, 2 hours tops.
Right.
And now, like,
Yeah, I mean,
everything
there'd be exceptions for stuff like Titanic, but it definitely sort of made it more of it became pretty standard for sure for a while. I mean, I think we're probably about to talk about another big fantasy movie, but the big context, scene setting that I want to do for anybody listening to this or watching this is that fantasy was not cool before Lord of the Rings, right? Like, no fantasy on television, no fantasy in movies.
Xena.
It was
What about Xena Warrior Princess?
It was just considered so cheesy and just a
Yeah.
money-losing proposition. And it's really this, and I think we're about to talk about Harry Potter, that really turned that around. And we're still feeling that 15 years later.
We wouldn't have Game of Thrones without the
Nope.
success
Yeah.
of Lord of the Rings.
And just finally, this Fellowship of the Ring, just the first film in the trilogy, became, at the time, the 5th highest grossing film of all time. A total global take of $870 million, voted number 50 on the American Film Institute's list of the 100 best movies of all time. That's how good this
Suck it,
was.
Minions.